Welcome, we're your hosts Alicia
and Whitney
on Coming Up Higher, where we're creating space through conversations, special guests, and inspiration
for you to come up higher in the things of Christ in everyday life. Hey everyone, it's an exciting day here in the Coming Up Higher studio because I am joined by my sister Alicia, but also a new author.
Yay!
Whose book is going to be coming out in about a month or so. It's called Reset, Recalibrate, Restore, My Journey from Broken to Breakthrough and the Lessons I Learned Along the Way.
Yeah.
So we're going to take this episode today to talk about the inspiration behind this book and to so she can tell us how we can pre-order the book. We need to pre-order this because I have already read it from front to back, and it's an incredible book. I'm so proud of my sister. She did an amazing job, and I know it wasn't the easiest thing to go through because she dives deep into parts of our testimony and just how God has brought beauty from the ashes. And so we are excited to do this episode and hear more about Alicia's book. But before we dive in, let's go ahead and hear a message from our sponsors.
You may have heard us mention the Fam Club on past episodes or on social media. We'd like to let you know more about what it is and how you can be a part.
The Fam Club is a monthly subscription partnership that gives you access to our exclusive content, discounted merch, a monthly newsletter, and being the first to know about our new music and what's going on with our ministry.
Our Fam Club support makes this podcast and other aspects of our ministry possible. If you'd like to join, log on to aliciaandwhitney.com and click the Fam Club tab.
Welcome back, Come Up crew. We're here to talk to Alicia specifically today about her new book, Reset, Recalibrate, and Restore. And I can't wait for us to dive into the details of what inspired her to write the book and just some lessons that she gives us because it's a powerful book. I've read it, and I really encourage you all to go and pre-order it because it'll bless your life in so many incredible ways. So, Alicia, let's just go ahead and dive in and just tell us a little bit about your book, maybe even what was the inspiration behind writing it, because I've written a couple of books and I know it's a task.
Yeah.
It's a labor of love. It's exciting and God uses it in so many ways. But what was the inspiration behind dedicating your time to do that?
Yeah, I've always felt led to write. Obviously, I'm a songwriter and in that capacity, but I've always enjoyed writing, creative writing and different things. And really one of my main ways I pray in my devotion time with the Lord is journaling. So writing is such a major part of my life. And so a book seems to be like a natural overflow to that. And, but it wasn't because it was pretty overwhelming in so many ways. And, as you know, it's like, where do you begin?
Right.
But I was so blessed that the Lord was just so gracious with me and as he planted that dream inside of me and we were talking about the book and stuff, he gave me the title Reset, Recalibrate, Restore, and he said, and I want you to tell your story in those three parts. The part where it felt like the reset button had been pressed on your life, where you were just at rock bottom, and the recalibration process and the lessons that you've learned with me and communing with him and then restore and what restoration looks like. And so that in my mind, because I can be a scattered person or just the creative people, you know how they are. It's just like you could go a lot of different directions, especially telling your life story in any capacity. It's such a long period of time with so many events and moments. And it's like, what do you choose to tell? How do you tell it? And that night when he gave me Reset, Recalibrate, Restore, it was such a beautiful outline for me to just put it in an order. And I started even writing down chapter titles that night. Before I even wrote a first page, I had chapter ideas and things like that very night. And so, that was really the beginning process. And like I said, that was back in 2018. And so a lot has happened since then, but, I'm really excited that it feels like something that I've been carrying for a while is going to be released.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And I know when God gives you a vision like that, or he gives you an idea, or like you said, like those three different divisions of the book, Reset, Recalibrate, Restore, and you just start running with it, like all these can be chapter titles and I can do this, I can write that. But then it sits for a while. A lot of times we think when God gives us a word, like it's for the immediate turnaround.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is. But a lot of times it seems like, especially with creative things, I know like my books took longer, like sat for a while. And I know a lot of our music, like that we're going to be releasing in our next album, are like 3 to 5 years old or so, but they're not irrelevant.
No.
They're actually more relevant now than they were at the time that we wrote them.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting how God works, that he'll give you an idea, he'll give you a vision, he'll give you a dream, but then it oftentimes takes time to cultivate. And kind of like a fine wine that sits on the shelf, it's sitting on the shelf, but it's increasing in value and it's increasing in taste and things. And that's how God does it with our dreams and what he gives us as well. But I love that he gave you that outline, because that is one of the hardest parts of writing a book, is like, I have all these ideas, but how do I pinpoint it and how do I bring it into something that's going to fit in 150 or to 250 pages? So when he gave you, Reset, Recalibrate, Restore, tell us a little bit about Reset. What is it? What does the reset look like?
Well, it's kind of funny that that's a word that's been popping up a lot, like especially in 2020. And like I said, I began writing in 2018, but then like all of a sudden in 2020, everybody's kept saying like the reset button's being pressed on, there's a great reset coming, and in the economy and just different things like that. But for me, my reset was when our dad passed away. It was just a difficult time that really brought me to rock bottom in a lot of ways. Also coming off from a broken home, with our parents' divorce and things like that. And then right into the early 20s, at 22, losing our dad to cancer. I mean, that was just like a whole lot of things, a whole lot of things for a 22-year-old at once. And it was just like, okay, I cannot continue the way I have been going, and it's not like I was really doing anything totally off base or anything, but it was just like, I need more.
Yeah.
And this has made me realize, this reset, that if I'm going to rebuild on this brokenness, I want to sort through it the right way. I want to deal with it with the Father. I want to heal and not just keep trudging through in brokenness, in woundedness, because as we know, those things inwardly, they soon start to show outwardly. And whether that's true. I noticed it with my reactions towards people, or attitudes that I had, or, dreams or visions of the future didn't have, just different things like that were being affected because of my perspective. And so the reset button really is for anybody that finds themselves in a broken place, that finds themselves just kind of at that rock bottom, or just maybe a fresh start, where maybe you lost your job, or maybe you just went through a divorce, unfortunately, or whatever it may be. It's a chance to start anew, and it's a chance to build on that ground level with the Father.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's so easy for us to see a reset as a negative thing, because oftentimes it does start out of difficulty, or it does start off of loss or grief, but it is the perfect opportunity to, just like you said, start at ground level and just start building things the way that God wants us to build. Because in life, we start off with a fresh start, so to speak, like when we're born, but then life happens, and you have just family dynamics, or maybe you have health dynamics, or just you're bullied, or you lost your job, like you said, or you get divorced, and you just find yourself in situations that you're like, man, that's not how I pictured my life going. But yet we can be encouraged in the fact that this is a new beginning with God.
That's good. Yeah.
Then that, life hasn't turned out the way I thought it would, or I thought I'd be at this job longer, or I thought this marriage would last, or I thought my kids would grow up to be this way and they didn't. But yet God uses those situations. Like that's the beginning. That's the genesis of a miracle story. That's the genesis of God really moving and doing incredible things in our lives.
Yeah.
So he takes us from a reset where we're at ground level and moves us into recalibration.
Mm-hmm.
What does recalibration look like?
Recalibration really is an invitation to go higher in Christ, to go to a new level in the things of him, to grow and expand. And really in the book, I talk about the lessons that I learned during the time of just rebuilding. And I like what you said about the reset. It doesn't really have to be a traumatic thing or a big thing, because it's just the process he takes us on. We go from glory to glory, from grace to grace. And so that's what this process was for me with recalibration. It was lessons when we went on missions trips, or when the Lord pointed things out to me, or even discovering dreams and purpose. When you go through a reset, I mean, I talk about it in the book, but we switched careers a career that I thought I was going to go into. I just, a lot of different things changed because the Lord was reawakening in me some things, some giftings and talents that I had just kind of put on the shelf at a different period. But once I kind of realized that life is short and I want to leave an impact, and I know what it is to lose someone and to feel something, and I want to mourn with those who mourn, and just different things like that. I wanted my life to just be totally what he wanted it to be, and not my plan anymore. And so the recalibration was even getting rid of preconceived mindsets or attitudes, or I talk about having a teachable spirit, which is like a word I got from a spiritual mom, Kathleen, at one time. She said, you're going to have to be teachable, mendable, pliable in this season if you want to go where God's asking you to go. And it was just like, oh, I hate that. Like no one wants to hear that. No one amens to that word.
That ain't a word you want.
That's not the sermon you listen to. It's like, your butt's going to have to be teachable. So just be quiet and listen, you know. That's not what we want to hear. But I'm so glad that she was bold enough to give me that word, because I learned so much. And when we listen to people like mentors above us, or pastors, or whatever, and we listen to the Father, and we have that teachable spirit, the recalibration process is so much easier, because you learn from others' wisdom, and you also learn from others' mistakes, and they say, don't make the same mistake I did. And having that teachable spirit really does recalibrate you to his standard.
Yeah, and I think it just speeds up the process way more than it would have without having like Holy Spirit with you and the God counsel in your life. That's why we so advocate having spiritual moms and spiritual dads, or mentors, whatever you want to call them, just because, like you said, you don't have to go around that mountain 100 times to learn something. You don't have to go through the devastating pain or heartbreak. Like, you can learn some of those things just by being taught by someone who's been there, done that, or has the experience. And as you were talking, I was just reminded, because the word recalibrate, that started really becoming a prevalent word in our life during a Wednesday night prayer time that we were having with the group that we meet with. And this was like probably 4 or 5 years ago or something. It's been a while. And the word recalibrate came out through worship and through the prayers and stuff that we were doing. And it was a word at that time that wasn't used very much. Like, you didn't really see it. And then sure enough, after it came out during prayer, like, you started seeing it, started popping up places. And now I hear it like all the time, I feel like, in sermons and things like that. But recalibration is so interesting, because if you're not careful, you can see like that word you got about being flexible, mendable, pliable. Like, we can see that as like correction, and what you're doing is wrong. And like God slapping us on the hands with a ruler kind of thing. But actually what we've realized is it can be, and you said it, like, it can be a really, I don't know if simple is the right word, but it can be an easier process than what we might originally think.
Yeah. And it can actually be an adventure. Like I said, it's recalibration is an invitation to a new way of life and to a new standard. And how many adventures I'd gone on, and most of them with you. Yeah. But, just even taking it into the new phase of my life, I talk about, getting married and processing grief and getting married and just all these things that were happening at once, but just like how I'm so grateful for the path that I chose in so many different ways. I'm grateful that we started the ministry. I'm grateful, obviously, for my marriage and for just allowing the Lord to just come in and heal those broken places, because it set the foundation for the future. And so that's one of the things I encourage people is like, don't see it, like you said, as just like this condemning thing, but just see it as this is, the Lord has something so much better for you than you ever designed for yourself.
Right.
And no, life's not perfect. I still struggle. I still have days of doubt and things, but like there's just this overwhelming sense of purpose in him that I have that I didn't have before.
Yeah.
And going through this process has given me that. And for that, I'm so grateful. And I know he's just going to keep building and building upon it.
Yeah. Because the thing with recalibration, we had looked it up too, I think in the dictionary that night or something, but sometimes recalibration isn't necessarily because something was calibrated wrong, but it's because there's a new standard now that this tool or whatever that you're recalibrating needs to be calibrated to. And I've thought about that often, because sometimes like I'll be doing good things, like I'll be whatever it is, like with work or ministry or my personal walk with God, I'll be doing good things, but then God all of a sudden recalibrates me like, hey, I want you to do this, or I want you to do it this way. It's like, well, what in the world? Like, I wasn't doing anything wrong before, but like I said, it's not that correction thing. It's just like, no, you weren't doing anything wrong, but I have more for you. And that's why I want you to start doing this or doing it this way. And it's that glory to glory thing that you were talking about, that the Bible says, like, it's just God taking you from one glory to the next. Yeah. And it's a beautiful process. Like it's not always easy, but it's not always hard.
Yeah.
So just learning to enjoy that recalibration process with God, I think is a good perspective to take on, that it's something we can partner with and enjoy with God. But lastly, we have the three sections of your book: reset, recalibrate, and then there's restore. What does it look like when God takes you from the reset, from, the ground level, maybe for some it's like the rock bottom, into recalibration? He's setting you to a new standard. He's taking you from glory to glory. What does that restore aspect look like?
Yeah. And I want to start by saying restoration is a process, and there's things that the Lord will work on you and they'll be resolved. And then there's things that take a little bit longer time, and you have opportunities that pop up and say, are you going to react like the old person used to? Are you going to react like you did in the past? Or are you going to choose to forgive? Are you going to choose to see my perspective on things? I've had conversations like that with the Lord, but one of the main things I talk about in the book is that restored people restore people.
That's good.
And so often we think of getting our breakthrough and getting our restoration in this and what it's going to look like. But I found so much of my restoration in service to others. I found so much of my restoration in worship, or on the mission field, or just doing what God created me to be. And communing with him daily is where my restoration came. And because of that, for this podcast is an overflow of that, or our music is an overflow of that. And that's just my thing. I encourage our listeners to, in the book, to find what's in them, what God has put in them, and their giftings, and just to kind of encourage them in the seasons of the in-betweens where it doesn't seem like a lot is happening, or where you're still growing, or you're still forgiving, or you're still grieving, or whatever it is, to have that encouragement that the ultimate restoration is in Jesus Christ. And life's not going to be perfect on this side of heaven, but you can really walk in that abundant life that Christ says he came to give us life and life abundantly, that he talks about in Scripture. And so that's one thing that restored is walking in your rightful identity in him. But it's also going back into some of those dark places where you were wounded and pulling people out. And we've shared this story on the podcast before, when Debbie was on, but I share it in the book where I'm walking into the hospital where our dad had passed away 5 years earlier, and I'm getting ready to go up and visit Chuck Short, who was like a spiritual father to me, and watching him be intubated and just struggling with cancer and just being frail and thin, just like my dad had been 5 years earlier in the same hospital. And I started to get emotional and started to think, like, why me? Why do I have to go through this? Or why, like, Lord, like, and kind of get into that pity party. But when I saw Chuck in there, I even got teary, because going into that familiar place and the familiar smells and just the environment, I was almost getting sucked back into that kind of, that person I was 5 years prior when our dad had passed. And Chuck looked, and I had mentioned it to Debbie when I was in the room, and Chuck was like, "I'm sorry, this reminds you of your dad." But it was like in that, and he got teary-eyed, and it was like in that moment, I was like, you know what, this isn't about me. This is about who I can be for them. And so that day in the hospital room, I just started worshiping, and I started using my gifting to just bring peace to the situation. And Chuck loved to worship, even when he couldn't talk, and he just raised his hand and we cried together. And that was just such a beautiful picture to me of, like, restored people restore people, is that we don't get stuck in our seasons of woundedness. And even though God will take you back to the same old places with the same old, people and the same old woundedness, and everything reminds you of your greatest moment of hurt and grief, that he's going to call you to be more. And just like Whitney's book, your book says, based off the verse of beauty for my ashes, he gives us beauty for our ashes and joy for our mourning. We're living testimonies that he does do that. And so restoration is that to me. It's not perfect. We won't be perfect this side of heaven, but we have an opportunity to partner with God and help bring others out of the pit in the process.
That's so beautifully said. And I know you talk this way in the book about just this process, that it is a process, and really God isn't looking for our perfection. And we shouldn't be looking for our perfection, because like you said, like, we're not going to achieve that this side of heaven. But I was talking with a friend recently, and she was just saying, because in a situation I was going through, I all of a sudden kind of got, those emotions came back, and it's like I was going to feel and think and respond like I would Whitney, a few years ago, or a year ago. But then I just stopped myself, and it's like, okay, I feel this. Let me process why I feel this, and kind of talk myself through it. And then within a half hour, I'd pulled myself together and, it was about my day. And I was talking with a friend about it, and she's like, well, Whitney, one thing I don't want you to get frustrated about, that you had this, what you might think of as a setback or whatever. Don't be discouraged that happened, because those things are going to happen all the time. Like things, people are going to upset you, or situations aren't going to be ideal or what you thought they would be, or people are going to leave or what, but it's what you do with that. And the fact that you had those initial emotions, you had those initial responses, but you decided to, like, step back, let me work through this, and then move forward. She's like, that is progress.
Yeah.
And that's the important part. Good. We're not looking for perfection. We're looking for progress. And so I want to encourage listeners today that I know a lot of you are on a journey, or if you read this book, you're going to get on a journey if you ain't already, where God's just going to start working on you and working with you over situations that have hurt you in the past, or over disappointments, or over unmet expectations. Mm-hmm. Like, God's going to start going in and just gently touching those areas and asking you if you want to partner in healing with him in those areas. And I want you to give yourself the grace that it's okay if if you haven't overcome some of these things fully yet, or if they still kind of trigger you a little bit, because as long as you're making progress, like that's the important part. So don't be hard on yourself. As long as you're still working on things with God, as long as you're still taking steps in the direction of being healed and restored, then it's all good. You're on the right path. You're headed in the right direction, and God's just going to continue that healing work in you.
Yeah, that's good.
So I want to, as we wrap up this episode, I just want to leave, is there any last remarks you have about the book, or?
Like I said, I'm excited to get this out to you guys, and I really believe it's just a tool that the Lord is just wanting to put in your hand to help you process through those things. Like on the cover, there's a picture of a flower, and it's in the different stages of blooming, and that's how it's been in this process with me and the Father. Is it's not been like ripping off a Band-Aid. It's not been like a harsh situation with the Father of you need to deal with this and you need to deal with this and I can't believe you struggle with this, but it's been a nurturing.
Yeah, for sure.
It's been tilling the ground gently. It's been cultivating. There's been manure sometimes been put on there, but he's gently pruned me in the process, and so don't be afraid of the process of the reset, recalibrate, restore. Because in his presence there is fullness of joy and treasures forevermore, and new opportunities to be had, new places to go, new people to meet. It's only going to go up from here, but don't be afraid of that process, because we serve a good Father who's a gentle, caring gardener of our lives and what we carry, and his ultimate goal is that you bear fruit. And so that's my encouragement to you guys. Remain in him, remain in the vine, and you're going to see some amazing things.
Yeah, it's so good. I completely agree. And I just love, as she talked about the cover, it's just a real holistic approach with this book of it literally starts from the beginning, reset, recalibrate, restore. Like you have the full beginning to end. And I know that as you read this, you will, like I said, go on your own journey. Like you'll be reading Alicia's and she'll be telling you how to apply it to your life. But it's definitely a holistic kind of approach to your relationship with God, and even following your pursuing your dreams and your goals and the things that God's put in you, and becoming the person that he's created you to be. And I just even want to encourage, with this cover, like she said, it starts with like a sprout, and then I don't know what you would call that, the middle stage, and then the flower.
Yeah.
But for those of you that feel buried right now, just know that, like she said, you're in the hands and the care of a caring gardener, and someone who's done this before, and someone you can trust, and who has good intentions and plans and purposes for you. You're not forgotten. You've been planted.
Yep.
And I know I said buried earlier, but you're not even buried, you're planted.
Yeah.
Because sometimes buried, we just bury something to leave it. But to be planted means that there's been a purpose in that growth. Yeah, it's intentional, and there's growth coming. So I just want to encourage our listeners with that, and let us know, how can we pre-order your book today?
Yeah, go ahead and log on to our website, aliciaandwhitney.com/store, and the book will be the first thing that pops up there, and you can pre-order, and when it comes out in October, you'll have it mailed to you in the first batch, and
Awesome.
And so that's exciting.
Maybe
and,
even signed?
Yeah, hey. We'll sign it. Yep, all those pre-orders are getting signed. So
awesome.
But I'm just so thankful for you, Whitney, and all your help with the book, and just that we get to do life and ministry together.
Yeah.
And it's part of the happy ending, abundant life of portion of this book for sure. And thank you to our listeners. We encourage you guys to rate and subscribe this podcast. Go ahead and share it. And get the word out there. Your support means so much to us.
Yeah. Thank you so much for listening. Go right now, pre-order your copy, aliciaandwhitney.com/store, because you need this book and you're going to love it. So we will see you next week on Coming Up Higher.
God bless.